Community College for 22 years. He has a rather lengthy bio, so I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a rundown on it. He's published in literature from the American Academy Institute of Arts and Letters. He's received an of Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's edited 3 anthologies, one of which was Sunflowers and Locomotives, Songs for Allen, Elegies for Allen Ginsberg. And he completed his correspondence of David Cope and Allen Ginsberg, 1997 to 1996, still unpublished.
1976 to 1996.
Yes.
That must be mixed up on the bio.
Yeah, I'm reading straight from the bio, so that must be from the bio. And he, let's see, he taught and appeared in a Chinese translation by Professor Zhang Ziqing as part of a group of the King, as part of 9/11 poems in the Houston Garden of Verses. 9 poems were included in translations by Zhang in Poetry periodical in Beijing. 2 of his poems were translated by Dr. Peter Feng for a Chinese online poetry journal, Poetry Sky. And they were discussed in volume 2 of Professor Zhang's 3-volume study, A History of 20th Century American Poetry. I think that's probably a good introduction. So if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, we can maybe even start with the story we were talking here earlier about Mr. Allen Ginsberg. And
that's sort of like beginning at the end, but that's okay. I should probably start first by talking about what the genesis was. I was an angry kid, like so many people, and my family had fallen apart. There was a lot of nasty feelings all over the place. I had a chip on my shoulder about adult men, and Alan's Howl saved me. That and the Rolling Stones, between the 2 of them, because both of them gave me permission to feel my feelings, if you will. And that poem was one that we used to get drunk in a little cabin up on the hill by my house and shout that poem at each other all day long. And it was odd. I went through all my high school, got rid of that crap, went to JC, which later became CZ, and wound up at my what became my alma mater, the University of Michigan, where I studied with Robert Hayden, great poet. And Alan came there on Moratorium Day, 1969. Are you guys familiar with that? This was, there were 2 major moratoriums against the Vietnam War. And a lot of people went to Washington, D.C., but Alan had a habit. He liked coming to Michigan for some reason. And he read at Hill Auditorium, which had 3,500 people in the audience. And I looked over, and a good portion of the crowd was crying because he was reminding us to be compassionate at a time when the world was so full of hate. And of course, that always has stuck with me because, well, the last 4 years. I guess that's the best way to put it. You know, all the hate that's been in our country. And I've had
especially during a time of war. During the time of the Vietnam War was very heated as well.
Oh yeah, we had 200 deaths a week. We'd ship the bodies home, and I lost 2 of my best friends from high school. One of them was in the, but I don't want to get into that. At any rate, when Alan read at Hill Auditorium, he read it soft, sad, and melancholy. So it wasn't as though it was an angry poem, even though there's a lot of anger in there. He was filling it with the feeling of that particular time. It was the first time I understood that the same words could have different implications if you read them differently aloud. And it was a big moment for me. And then he came to Allendale outside of Grand Rapids, where I lived, and spoke at the National Poetry Festival at that point. And big change of heart. He said, we on the left have carried far too much anger in our hearts and we have to learn how to make peace with ourselves so that we can bring peace to the world. And that was a big moment too.
Hmm.
I listened to him, and I listened to a lot of the other poets. I loved them all, and started a magazine. And then about 1976, 75, I sent a little chapbook that I published off to him, and he wrote back and said, I want to buy 12 copies from you, and here's a check for it. And I was about floored because I didn't even expect an answer from him. And he said he loved the poems. And a correspondence began at that time, which lasted from 76 to 96. And actually, in the 90s, most of what we did was telephone calls because we'd gotten beyond letters and that. But later, I assembled all the letters, and I've got a book that I'm going to try to get published quite soon because I'm done with publishing Big Scream, my magazine, after 60 issues. And but the question that we were talking about was the day he died. I don't remember the exact date personally because I'm sort of well, I'm 73. I don't remember all that shit very well. But he called up a great number of his friends as he was dying. And I had gone to bed, and I didn't know about this. I knew that he was very, very sick because we had been following him. You know, of course, I corresponded with him. And I went to sleep. It was 11 or 12 at night. I can't remember. And my daughter Ann came running down the stairs from her bedroom and pounded on the door and said, "Dad, you got to get up. Alan called you, and he sounds really sick." And so we went out and into the front room, and I played back the tape, and it basically was his farewell. And he did sound awful. I was apparently one of the last ones that he phoned. He phoned a lot of people. And so I was up most of the night, and I fell asleep finally at 3 or 4 in the morning. I can't remember. And Bill Morgan, his bibliographer, called me up at about 8, and he said, "David, are you standing up?" And I knew right then what it was. So I had the difficult thing that day where I was teaching my multicultural lit class, which was one of my favorite classes to teach at that time. And I had a great bunch of students, and I came into work and I said, "Look, they've assigned me," I told them the story of Alan's death. Of course, they all knew it because they knew about my background a little. And I said, "They have assigned me, Bill Morgan and the others have assigned me to the newspapers when they come in." There was me, Ferlinghetti, and about 3 or 4 other people that fielded the queries from newspapers. And basically, I told my students, "You have to teach yourself today. I have to do this back in my office." And because I'd given them my office number, and the students agreed with that. And I went back, and it was an hour-and-a-half class, and I fielded a hell of a lot of papers, and later found out that I was quoted in newspapers from one end of the country to the other. It was really weird, especially given that situation. But I came back, and my students at the end of the time, my students had a list of questions for me on the topic. So they were doing their work while I was there. They weren't just a bunch of slouches. And that was that story. So I was working on my PhD at the time in English drama, Renaissance, Shakespeare's time. And it really occasioned a change in my life, because I was raising 3 kids, publishing my poems and books, and teaching 18 to 19 hours of classes, which is a full load for an English teacher is about 12 hours, which is really 3 times that, 36 hours, because you got the prep and all the other stuff. But I was doing all that, and then the PhD work on top of it, and I reached a point where I just said, I've gotten 60 hours of credits. That's the equivalent of 2 master's degrees, and I'm tired of doing this shit. And when Alan died, it was sort of like seek a new direction. So I did, and I went in a variety of ways. we published that Sunflowers and Locomotives text, which was, I collected elegies for Alan from everybody from student poets to Gary Snyder and Carl Ricosi and other people like that, Ferlinghetti, and I published them all together. And I should have done a big print run, but I was a dumb shit at that age, so I ran out of copies. I think I have to go find another one because the one I had left has somehow disappeared around this house. Happens when you've been collecting papers for so long. But I hope that explains that. Anyways, and here we are at this juncture. And the odd thing was, when Zhang published my poems in Poetry Periodical in China, that's their most prominent literary magazine. It's in Beijing. And they called me up and invited me to attend the Suining, how'd they put it? Suining Poetry Week and Zhenjiang Awards, International Awards. And so they said, all right, and we'll give you all your airfare. We'll take care of your food and your lodging. And all you have to do is show up. And they gave me some assignments of things to write and so on. And so I thought, well, 13-hour flight, I wasn't too crazy about that. But then I thought, Jesus, you're never going to get an opportunity like this again. So I went.
Right.
And when I got there, they all knew me because of Zhang. He's the most famous translator in China. But more importantly, they all knew that I had a long friendship with Alan. And Alan, of course, had gotten all of us stirred up because in 1984 he had, written all those poems in China because that's where he was. And Chinese scholars were intrigued by him, and they started publishing his work, translating and publishing, and also Kerouac's. So the ground was prepared. And when I came, by that time, Jim Cohn and I, who's a poet in Colorado, we had been corresponding with first Wen Chuan, who was the first translator, and then Zhang came on board when Wen Chuan died. He had a heart attack, and I got to know him very well. We wound up having these enormous dialogues about the difficulties of translating from two languages so dissimilar to each other. And essentially, I got out there, and when I got up in the dialogues we were having with the Chinese poets about how do they get onto the international scene, which is what I'm about right now, this one scholar got up after I finished my presentation. I was walking back off the dais and getting ready to sit, and some guy came up there with this book, and he got up on the dais and he said, "David Cope, you need to come back a minute." Now, what the hell did I do? So I came back, and he said, "We all know that you were a good friend of Allen Ginsberg. I have a 32-page essay on Allen Ginsberg's poetry in my book, and I want this copy for you." And he presented it to me in front of everybody in the whole conference. So I immediately became sort of a celebrity. And yeah, well, and they had interviews for all the poets, all the international poets right away. I was the only one from the United States. And at first I was just saying I was from Michigan because I didn't want to say United States and then have to explain that Trump.
So this was recent. This was a recent
2019, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So right now what I'm involved with is two things. I've finished my publication of my my magazine after, I started in 74, and I went all the way to this year, and I've got 60 issues, and I figure how many last that long in the indie press. And I'm very proud of what I did. I'm going to eventually do an anthology, best of the poets in those 60 issues. But I'm working with Wang Ping, who's out in Minnesota, great Chinese American poet, dual citizenship, terrific poet. She's got, her last book was My Name is Immigrant, and it was never more important that particular thing got out, that particular message got out. And she told the story of the prejudice she had to overcome when she came here from her homeland. She's been a friend for a long time. I went and visited her one time too, but she and I were working on contemporary Chinese poets. One of the things that my Bridge Across the Pacific book talked about was my recommendation that if you're going to try to enter the poetry stream of another nation, you need to have first translations of your work presented. And because I gave this a lot of thought when they were talking about how do we get on board. And I thought to myself, how did I get to know people? How did I get to know Lorca and Neruda? How did I get to know Villon and Ronsard and all those people, and Baudelaire and all the rest? A crazy ass Rimbaud. Right now I'm reading Russian women poets, Marina Tsvetaeva and Anna Akhmatova. I don't have Russian, but those translations are just stunning. Those two women should be accorded being some of the best poets of the 20th century, period. But anyway.
Wow. Would you like to read us a work or two of yours, of your own?
Yeah, I probably could. Give me a second here. I got to dig something up. Probably an older one and a younger one. Let's see what we got here. I thought you might ask me that.
If you're joining us for the first time, we're on Parrot Literary Corner with David Cope, and we're here to explore his poetic world. And this is what we do every day. So if you really want to enjoy us, so please subscribe to our channel, especially our YouTube channel. You'll get great poets, great writers, great creative minds across the globe, invited every day. This is the only TV channel in the entire globe that gives the platform for creative mind. So we are on the show today with our unique poet, great writer who has had impact on the life of millions of creative minds within the United States and beyond. So we are with David Cope, and David Cope will be rendering a poem, and then we'll be looking at other part of this poetic world within the time we're going to spend with him today. So over to you, David Cope, if you're ready to present the poem.
I have a hell of a time when I'm not prepared and that sort of thing, but just a second. I know exactly what I want to do, but I have to get to it. This is appropriate for right now. This poem takes place in my hometown of Granville, but you'll get it in a second. The title is Silent March, Candlelight Vigil for George Floyd. The march was to be silent meditation from Rosa Parks Circle past the cop station in the park to the park candlelight vigil memory for George Floyd. Oh, I lost you a second here.
I'm still here.
Never got to candles nor light. Downtown erupted, cars aflame, windows smashed, the vault of midnight looted, Cuban Sanchez restaurant, public library, art museum windows shattered. Too much like Boogaloo Boys or the Agent Provocateur, inciting violence, cursing cops and bystanders in Ann Arbor or Detroit, late 60s. Proved when Allen Ginsberg showed me, sat with me over FOIA papers showing FBI connections then. Charnel House we live in. Pandemic deaths, riots, rebellions across the nation. Leaders threatened by thugs with assault rifles. President's threats and lies. What angels hover over us now? Which ghost riders fill our evening skies? What dreams flee this night? George Floyd, peaceful spirit, be with us now. I may have one or two more.
Okay.
I don't want to get into the January 6th stuff. There's a whole lot of poems in that, and they're not fun to read. I mean, you go back and you remember it, it's hell. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe go back to my beginnings which is an easy passage. If I can find it. Hang on a minute. Gotta go to the table of contents. This is my new book that I'm working on. Hold on a second. The Rain, page 31. There's what it is. Okay.
Those of us listening right now, we have David Cope. Please subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much for listening in and viewing. Go ahead, David.
Thank you very much for having me on board. I really appreciate this.
Very welcome.
It's fun. When I was finding my way as a young poet, I tried on a lot of different masks, as it were, to figure out what my voice was, where I was going, what my vision was. When I found it was when I started, I had a strong background in Dante and Chaucer and Shakespeare and those people, William Blake, Whitman. But I needed to be in the modern world. Alan was a great mentor for me, but I did not write like him except when I had to write his elegy, where I took his style and used that as the style itself as a way of complimenting him for who he was. But the ones that really moved me were William Carlos Williams, whose command of a variety of styles and enormous numbers of forms of compassion and kindness, as a doctor living in Patterson and Rutherford, New Jersey, who refused to be a part of the big scene because he really was interested in recording the lives of ordinary people. The other one was Charles Reznikoff, great Jewish poet. And Reznikoff was really the one that I glommed onto the most. I was working in a factory for 3 years, slowly but surely being crushed by the horrors of it. Eventually, I got out of there and I went to working as a custodian in the ghettos of the public schools. Went through a lot of different things, and I really wound up to the point where I'd spent 18 years as a custodian and 22 years as a college professor when I finished my grade. And it's a damnedest thing because, when you're a janitor, you learn how to cuss really good. And smash and destroy and carry on like a mad dog with all the rest of the guys. But I got up in the teaching and I had to use that polysyllabic terminology all the time, and I loved it and it paid well. But at the same time, there's a part of me that has always retained that ordinary guy, if you will. So Reznikoff was important to me. And this goes back to Alan again. When Alan wrote me to ask those 12 copies, I wrote him back and I said, do you think you could send one to Charles Reznikoff? And he wrote back and he said, alas, Reznikoff died recently. But he had a little memory of supping with him on his West Side apartment in New York. I actually found the location of where Charles lived at one point. But so anyways, when I got the news that Reznikoff was dead, a lot of deaths here. But what can I say? I wrote this elegy, which I never published, never read. Last week I read in a Zoom reading in Detroit, and that was the first time it's ever been publicly aired. So you guys get to be the second ones. This is called The Rain. It's in memoriam Charles Reznikoff. It has never gotten his due as much, except among poets. The big anthologies from all the fancy publishers, they don't include him. They're fools. But anyway, okay, so The Rain. Looking for it. Silence is nowhere. The knife blade scrapes on the cutting board. Children yell across the meadow. The sad news reaches me. This gray morning has made me turn again. Now the rain gusts over the pavement. Another is gone. The old poet whose steely voice shook compassion from sorrow, celebrated the worker's endurance, the delicate heart, even in irony. When I'm full of sadness, the wind comes to me. Where there's sorrow, let me be there. That's it.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
I find that your elegiac works tend, from what I've read of your work, they tend to have the most power for me. And I don't know if that's just my personal involvement with the poetry, or if there's like
Yeah.
if that brings power of your own in your work.
I've often been fascinated by that. They say that death hanging over us all is what charges the imagination. I don't know if it's true or not. I've had a lot of deaths in my life, starting with my cousin when I think it was 6 years old or something. And I've got a poem about that, which it's as closely remembered as something I wrote yesterday, in that sense. But and I lost a friend, two friends in Vietnam. One of them, basically, the corpse was in pieces. They had to have a closed casket funeral, and there's been deaths all over the place. Now I always think to myself, well, you can celebrate the light moments, and I do, but it seems to me that because of the limitations of this life, there needs to be a memory of those who have touched us, if that makes sense. And
Right.
so I've always made a point of that, and I have had people tell me, "You write too many elegies." But
well, they're lovely. They're lovely.
Yeah.
I like them a lot. They have a lot of power and emotional
Thank you.
depth. And
Thank you.
you're very welcome.
So, anyways, how much time we got left?
We're coming up on about 8 more minutes.
8 more minutes.
So,
Okay, so
yeah,
I can give you a quick rundown on what's going on now. I've already mentioned the Chinese anthology of contemporary writers that I'm going to publish.
Okay.
We're working with the Cafe Review. They've got a guest editor who's going to publish some Chinese translations as well.
So this translation, do you work with Wang Ping, right?
Yes.
So while you were talking, you made mention of the fact that Wang Ping is one of the greatest poets or translators of modern time. What did you observe in her writing?
Say it again.
You said that Wang Ping is one of the greatest translators or creative mind of our time today, with another
Creative
person.
mind, yeah.
So why did you say this? What did you observe in her writing, especially in My Name is Immigrant?
Well, that wasn't translating. That she writes in both languages. When she came here, Alan picked her up and helped her too. But My Name is Immigrant tells of her in English, her experiences when she first came here, where she got called chink and where she was fired from the job because she didn't behave the way they wanted them to. One kind of horror after another. And, when she came here, she already had her degree from Beijing University, which is a fine university. And she couldn't get that kind of job. So Alan helped her out a little bit, and she got published with, I think it was, oh, Jesus, what's that press there in New York? Not coming to me right now. At any rate,
New Directions.
No, it wasn't New Directions. It was something like Roof or one of the others. I can't remember.
Okay.
At any rate, she went from one thing to another. She last year, I think it was last year or year before, she did a dance on Broadway. It was year before, not last year. Dance on Broadway, Chinese. She has a blog called Kinship of Rivers, which is on Facebook. And it's the Yangtze River, but it's also the Mississippi where she lives now. And it welcomes people from all over. And she's put prayer flags on top of Mount Kilimanjaro and in India and other places. She's an amazing person. She's learning how to fire a crossbow right now. Don't ask me what that's about, but she likes to go boating on the river and numerous things. When I went to visit her classes at McAllister College, there it was Chinese New Year, and the night before the New Year was the next day when I arrived. They had a full-fledged Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year dinner at the house with a great big fish and a whole bit. And she taught me how to make Chinese dumplings. You know, she had this stuff she'd made into a great big pot, and you had to take a little off and put it into this thing, and there was a certain way you had to arrange them. So I learned Chinese dumplings and a couple of other dishes, not knowing that she was training me. The next day we got into the China house at her school, and all of her classes showed up to celebrate with her. And so she came to me and she said, your job is going to be to train these kids how to do dumplings. So I showed them how, and they all picked it up. And while we were doing it, it was the strangest way to hold a class. You know, I'm supposed to be teaching them about poetry. And so what I did is I started asking them about their experiences with it. And we wound up having incredible dialogue as we made these dumplings. It was really neat. And then later, after we'd had the dinner and sat down and talked back and forth in a big crowd, in sort of a multiple dialogue, we went up to her office where she has an enormous library, and we had her advanced students, and I read to them and they read to me, and we talked about things, and we got done with that class, and it was time for me to catch my plane. She threw me in the car and we went straight to the airport, and I was home in about 3-4 hours. But wow. She's an amazing person, and anytime I get a chance to work with her, I feel very happy because I know it's going to be a wonderful collaborative experience.
So what's your most accomplished work? What you feel that the time you feel that you feel fulfilled as a poet? Since the
I can't
beginning
answer.
of writing.
I can't really answer that one. I love whatever I'm working with at the time. And it was odd. I was looking at some of my stuff from the late 90s and 20,000 to about 2008 or 2009. I hadn't read those poems in a long time, and I was like, my God, I was writing with these incredible rhythms back then that I don't use anymore. But you know, you can't always do the same thing. The one thing I learned was, some do. I mean, you've got Emily Dickinson where her style doesn't change that much, but every single one of them are masterpieces. I like Ezra Pound's idea of make it new. So if you've written in a certain way, there's a point where after a certain book is done, the next book, you have to entertain the idea of try to find a new way to write. And there's always some change in your style that can happen, which is based on both continuing experience of other poets' writings. Neruda was very important to me in Spanish because he has the most incredible rhythms. Lorca used to tear me up, you know, that verde que te quiero verde, which sounds beautiful in Spanish, but if you say green, how much I want you green in English, people are going to scratch their heads. They don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And
right.
Yeah. Well, you know, I just immediately thought to myself, verde. Okay, so this is like Cleopatra in Shakespeare's play talking about her salad days when she was green, you know, so she did not know.
We have about a minute and a half. So can you give us like a final message or, you know, something that you'd like to impart to the viewers listening right now?
For the younger ones, what I would say is you're gonna have to face a lot of crap and a lot of no. I'm still doing it on occasion, but don't give up. You let it slide off your back like water off a duck's back and pursue your dream. That's all I can say. Alan told everybody don't follow my way of doing things when he was old, but he was lying to us. I'm very happy. I hope to die singing.
Wow.
Yep.
Thank you very much for joining us today, David. It's been a wonderful show. This has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner. I am your host and anchor, Dustin Pickering. Yes. Thank you very much, David, again for joining us. We're doing the 1 million subscriber challenge. For those who are creative minds or anybody who would like to subscribe to our channel, please do. This is a challenge to help support artists and the artists we support with our show. And if you would like to join our show sometime, then please get in touch with us as well. So thank you very much for joining us again, David, and thank you to our viewers.
One thing. Can I get the video of this somewhere?
You will definitely get that.
On
yes.
Facebook.
It'll be on YouTube.